Okay, in the previous presentation, I made it very clear that the Igbos worship one God, and the name of that God is Chukwu Abiyama, which I demonstrated actually means God of Abraham in today's English. Um, Now, I also showed that I also demonstrated that the Igbos worship one God from the writings of Olaudah Ekwanu, a book I recommend everyone to read and see for themselves this testimony. Now, let me use that to give our next point, which the Igbos practice segregation and killing of members who worship other gods before the coming of the Bible to Africa. Now, in Igbo land, let me explain this a little bit. In Igbo land, there's something called the Usu system. What does that mean? It means that if you go to any of the oracles, any of the deities, like I said, nowadays we have a lot of deities in our communities. But if you go to any of them and pledge allegiance to them, to worship them, to be their servants or whatever, usually people do that in exchange for protection or for wealth. If you go to any of these deities and dedicate yourself to them, immediately you are ostracized by the rest of your community. Everyone stops having anything to do with you. You become an Osun. Now, this is the proof I'm telling you that the Igbos do not worship these idols you see lying around our communities. They were not originally our God. If these were our gods, why would we segregate against those who worship them? So history will tell you that any community that have a foreign object, a foreign method or practice imposed on them, they will try to protect themselves by excommunicating or cutting off their members that go and join those methods, those practices. And that's what we did, and we call that the Osu system. It's because the Igbos originally did not worship these gods. These gods were never part of our worship. And I explained that from the testament of Mr. Olaudah Ekwonu, that we worshipped one God who is called Chukwu Abiyama. And that Chukwu Abiyama I demonstrated actually means God of Abraham. And it's because of that we segregate against our members, our brothers, who actually go to worship other gods. We call them Osu, and we have nothing to do with them. We do not marry into their communities. We have literally nothing to do with them. Now, this is where I have problem with most early Igbo writers. Most of them, if not all of them, have called the Osu system a caste system, which is it's criminal to even say that, because a caste system is a system where some people are born slaves and some people are born free. So if you're born a slave, you're going to be just serving one of the free men forever. This is not the case in Igbo land. In Igbo land, everyone is born free, and everyone is free to do what he or she wants to do. However, if you go and dedicate yourself to idols, you are ostracized. You are cut off. And not only you, your children after you, your children are also cut off. They become Osu. So it is not a consequence of how you are born. Nobody is born an Osu. It's a consequence of your action. If you go and worship this God, we excommunicate against you. That is the proof I have that the Igbos never worshiped this God in the first place, because nowhere else in the world is this done. If, for instance, you are in Yoruba land, if you go and worship any of the gods, you will be treated with the most respect and dignity. If you are a Shango priest or Ifa priest or anything, you'll be treated with dignity and respect. In Igbo land, that's not the case. If you go and dedicate yourself to Amadioha, to any of the gods, you are ostracized. You become an Osu, and it doesn't matter your status. You can be the king of a village. Once you go and dedicate yourself to these deities, you are immediately ostracized. Now let's go to the Bible and see where this is done. If you go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 13, you see that the Hebrews in the Bible actually have this same practice. In fact, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 13, I think it's from verse 6, the Most High told through Moses, told the Hebrews that if your brother, the child of your mother, should... Okay, let me read it directly from the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 6, it said, if thy brother, the son of thy mother, or thy son, or thy daughter, or the wife of thy bosom, or thy friend, which is at thy own soul, entice thee secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which thou hast not known, thou nor thy fathers, namely of the gods of the people which are around about you, nigh unto thee, or far off from thee, from the one end of the earth, even unto the other of the earth. Thou shalt not consent unto him, nor hearken unto him, neither shalt thy eye pity him, neither shalt thou spare, neither shalt thou conceal him, but thou shalt surely kill him. Thy hand shall be the first upon him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And thou shalt stone him with stones, that he die, because he has sought to thrust thee away from the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Now, do you see the origin of the Osu system in Igbo land? Do you see why the Igbos have something that we call the Osu system, when if you go and worship other gods, you are immediately ostracized? If you read the book of Dr. Elizabeth Isichei, she wrote a book called The Igbo People and the Europeans, a genesis of a relationship to 1906. In fact, she wrote so many other books about the origin of so many other tribes, and including the Igbo people. If you read that book, you find out that in those days, the Osu people, those who go to worship other gods, were killed. We used to kill them. And so the Christians came and they stopped this practice. In fact, the Osus were the first to convert to Christianity because they felt they were being abandoned by the rest of their brethren. So they converted to Christianity, and then the Christians started telling us how evil the Osu system is. But do you see now that it's actually biblical? That you should not go and worship other gods. If you look at the deities in our communities today, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that those deities actually come from the neighboring communities around us. For instance, if you go to the Arochukwu area of Igbo land, which is one of the very first people to bring in oracles in Igbo land, the oracles they worship there is called Ekbe, which comes from the Ibibio tribes. If you go to the northern part of Igbo land, the oracles they worship, they actually come from Igala or Idoma or the Efik tribes. If you go to the western part of Igbo land, or what you call the Delta Igbos, the deities and the oracles they worship actually come from the Ido kingdom, the Bini kingdom, and so on and so forth. So the oracles we worship in Igbo land can be traced to the neighboring communities. So this is why we had the Osu system in Igbo land, and it's so shameful and disgraceful that early Igbo writers will call this a segregatory, a caste system. Will castigate this without actually linking this to biblical practices. We do this, we segregate among our brothers that do this, that worship these idols, because it was commanded of us by the Most High in Deuteronomy chapter 13 from verse 6. This is a command from God. Now, I have a lot of friends that are actually Osu. We all grew up together. You see, the segregation that we do to the Osu people is not like what the Catholic Church do to their members, their renegade members, the excommunication in the Catholic Church. No, the Osu in the village still have their land, they still have everything. We just don't marry into them. We basically don't have a whole lot of things to do with them. And the solution is very simple. You see, by the very definition of Osu as someone who leaves the God of Abraham to go and worship other God, all of us are Osu now in Igbo land. All of us. Because we have left the God of our ancestors, we have left the practices that He gave us, and we have left the method that the statutes and laws that He ordained for us, and we've gone a-whoring to other gods. We have either gone to worship other idols that are scattered all over our communities right now, and these idols, unfortunately, are being used to intimidate and bleed our people dry. We've gone to worship those gods, or we've gone to worship the God of the Christians. We've gone to worship Jesus. And I know some of you will be surprised when I say Jesus is not the right God. Of course, Jesus is pagan. Don't get me wrong, the story of Christ that is told in the New Testament is correct. However, that story was actually co-opted and a religion was built out of it. And that religion can be traced to ancient Babylon. It's a Babylonian religion. From the Babylonians, it got to the Assyrians. From the Assyrians, it got to Egyptians. From the Egyptians to Greeks. From the Greeks to the Romans. And the Romans are still in charge today. They packaged it under a different thing. Just used the Bible to wrap it around, and they're presenting it to people as a good religion. But it's not. In this context, I would like to remain here that all of us are Osu now. We've actually left the God of our salvation, the God who created us, the God who saved us from the house of bondage, have been protecting us from what we've been going through, and we've gone to worship the gods of the people around us. However, the solution to being an Osu is we all need to come back to this God and ask Him for forgiveness. That's all. You see, the Most High made it very clear that He visits the sin of those who hate Him onto their children, even unto the fourth generation. So, if you are also today, which we all are, chances are that you are way beyond the fourth generation of whoever went to dedicate himself to the idols. The Most High is no longer angry with you. All you need to do is to come back to God and ask for forgiveness. The Most High is bound by His words to forgive you. That is a very simple process. Do not listen to what the Christians say Osu is just some kind of man inhumanity to man. No, it's not. The Osu system is a method for our people to preserve the worship that the Most High ordained for us. That's what it is. So if you are an Osu, please note that someone in your lineage has actually betrayed the worship of the Most High and gone to worship other gods. And all you need to do is to ask for forgiveness for that offense. And by that definition, knowing that we all have gone to worship Jesus, or gone to worship idols, or gone to worship Muhammad, or whatever, Islam, or whatever religion that we're practicing, we've all left the God of our salvation. We are all Osu by the definition now. So everybody needs to come back to this God. We need to come back. That's why our mission is here, to inform our people to come back to the worship of the right God, the God of Abraham. In Igbo land, we call Him Chukwu Abiyama. And if you stay with us in our presentations, in our videos, in our website, we'll explain to people how this God wants to be worshipped from the Bible and how He should be worshipped.